Is it sort of PG, this podcast, or I do feel very passionate about this because I think teaching should be the best job in the world. The education system is dreadful, and
that's it. You're just left in the dark, and if you're a teacher and you want to do something in your class, go buy it yourself.
Yeah, I can't get my head round how so many teachers in America have second jobs. For the teachers to get that pay increase, it has to come out of existing school budgets, especially when you've got a government who have wasted billions during the pandemic.
But I will tell you one thing, America is great in its view of capitalism.
Please put a lock on your sort of adult toy drawer. Sort of screaming Expelliarmus, and it's like, listen, that's not what you think it is, my friend. You don't think the morning sickness is because there's more than one in there.
The Avenue of the Strongest is a podcast dedicated to exploring the lives and experiences of the most inspiring individuals from around the world. Each episode features interviews with fascinating guests who share their insights and wisdom on a variety of topics, including education, impact, motivation, help, and learning. I'm your host, Ania Chowdhury.
And Vlad Suleiman.
Today, we are thrilled to have Lee Parkinson on our show, a primary school teacher with over 15 years of experience, a podcaster, two-time best-selling author, and teacher trainer for his brand, Mr. P ICT. Mr. P is an advocate for using technology in the classroom to raise standards and has been making waves with his innovative approach to teaching. He has recently developed an AI tool called TeachMateAI, which is aimed at helping teachers to create more personalized and engaging learning experiences for these students. Mr. P, welcome to the show.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, of course. I'd love to get started and understand more about your background and how you got into teaching.
Yeah, so I've been teaching for 15 years. I never was one for sort of being a child. I was never wanting to be a teacher when I grew up. I actually wanted to be an actor when I was growing up.
This podcast is sponsored by ArgoPrep, an award-winning educational publisher serving over 1 million students nationwide. If you're a kindergarten to 8th grade teacher or principal, be sure to check out our supplementary workbooks to get your students ready for standardized state testing. We cover all subjects from kindergarten to 8th grade. Use the coupon code AVENUE for a 25% discount off of all purchase orders. Visit us today at argoprep.com/store.
But I didn't end up getting into university to do that. And my then girlfriend during sixth form, or during sort of like college, she went on to do teaching. And so I decided, yeah, I'll give that a go. And the rest is history. So I've worked at the same primary school since qualifying 15 years ago. I got married. We had children. We ended up having triplets. 12 years ago, actually. It's their birthday today. So I'm doing this while they're out playing with their friends, and then we're going to go and celebrate a little bit later. So when they came along, things changed a lot. My focus was more on looking at going into sort of management or administration and sort of senior leadership. And then my head teacher said, look, well, what we'll do then is we'll bring you out of having a full-time class and you can cover PPA across the school. So in England, every teacher, it gets sort of half a day of what's called PPA, which is planning, preparation, assessment time. So then I would cover that across the school to get experience right across a primary school from sort of ages 5 to 11. And then he asked me to develop my subject area, which was computing, or ICT as it was back then. And I said, yeah, that's fine. Sounds really good, but I need some decent kit to do it. Mm-hmm. So I managed to convince him to invest in a class set of iPads. And then I spent the best part of a year taking them around the school, using them right across the curriculum, and suddenly found that these devices could help children in so many different ways, really remove barriers, just make the learning so much more sort of engaging and empowering. And then everything that we were doing in class, I was sharing these ideas on social media, through Twitter and a blog. And after a while, I started getting requests to sort of do training and CPD sessions. And so took the plunge. And at the end of that academic year, decided to go part-time. I still wanted to teach part-time, still wanted to be in the classroom, but then started my own business, and the rest is history. So I've spent the best part of a decade now sort of working part-time in my school. Then the other part of the week, I'll travel all around the UK and beyond. Although I've never done any training in America yet.
Right. Okay.
And sort of supporting schools and teachers to make more out of the technology in their school. And I've sort of been sharing those ideas, but also sharing funny insights into life in the classroom. And that's sort of grown that social media presence. And then, 5 years ago, started the podcast, and that's gone from strength to strength. We've had the 2 books out. We've just finished a 50-date plus live tour across the UK, and then we've got another tour booked in for later this year. So, all exciting stuff.
So a lot going on. Is that correct?
Yeah, I like to keep busy. I don't sleep much.
Yeah. Wow. Well, first of all, happy birthday to your kids. My second question would be, it's not related to teaching, but it's when you found out that you were having triplets, what was that experience like?
It was funny. So we went to the scan. So I've got an older stepson as well. So he's 19 now. So he must have been 6 or 7 when we found out we were expecting. So we wanted him to feel included. So he came along to the scan, and it was interesting because the night before, my wife had dreadful morning sickness, 10 times worse than what she had with Callum. And I sort of joked saying, "Oh, you don't think the morning sickness is because there's more than one in there?" And she's like, no. So we go to the scan, and the nurse starts putting the sort of gel and starts moving the little scanner around. And then this concerned look dawns on her face. She sort of moves the scan screen away. And initially we were panicking, thinking, "Oh, what's going on?" And then she just said, "Have you been having any fertility treatment?" We were like, "No." And then she just went like that. She just held 3 fingers up. So my wife burst into tears. I think I laughed. I was just sort of astounded by it. And that journey started from there.
Wow. Wow. That's incredible. Well, so I know you spent some time in New York City as well. And I'm sure you see some content on the American side from teachers. I wanted to ask, in your opinion, what are the most noticeable cultural differences between UK schools and US schools?
So I've not spent too much time I've spent no time in US schools, so my reference isn't. But
or maybe just like the teachers in general, right?
I've spoken to a lot of teachers, and we've had a couple of guests on the podcast. The saving, because things aren't great over in England. Like the education system is dreadful, and I'm constantly talking about that. But I suppose the only saving, and this sounds really bad, the only saving grace is, it could be worse. It could be what it's like in America. So
thank you for saying that.
No, but
no, you're right. You are 100% right.
Yeah. I can't get my head round how so many teachers in America have second jobs. It astounds me. Because it's becoming more common here. So I think the latest statistics here have said that 1 in 10 have a second job. But if you're going to do your job effectively,
is it 1 in 10 in UK?
Yeah. I don't know what it is in America. I'm assuming it's more.
It's at like 1 in 5 minimum. It's really more. It used to be 1 in 5. I think now it's 1 in 4. But right. It's just increasing.
It's not only that they have a second job; they're working on weekends as well. I see from our side, sometimes they're checking emails late night, Saturday, Sunday, and replying to it, to work email.
I can't get my head around how that's possible given the workload. Especially, again, I'm not familiar. I'm assuming it's a similar sort of workload, similar sort of pressures. I just don't know how to teach it. Because for me, it's like if you've not got that time to switch off, recharge your batteries, you can't then be at your best in class. And surely what we want for our children are refreshed, well-rested teachers who can do their job to the best of their ability. And to think they've then got to go off and do another shift or work all their weekends, I just don't see how that's sustainable. So I'm assuming the sort of recruitment side of things, which again is dreadful here, is similar, if not worse, over there. I think obviously the biggest one, and not that I necessarily want to open this can of worms, but the whole gun crime over there is just astounding. It's just astounding. Like, it's pretty much every week, isn't it? You hear of another story where innocent children and teachers and school staff have lost their lives. And you know, we had one school shooting here probably about 30 years ago in Dunblane in Scotland.
Wow.
30 since then
30 years.
we introduced such strict gun laws that there's never been a repeated incident.
We had one last week.
It's already seventh in this year.
Yeah.
It's already seventh
for school,
just
school shooting, right? Just for school shooting,
And I do find it funny that one of the solutions is to arm the teachers. That was one of the solutions, like the only way to. And you think, listen, I work with teachers who can't save a PDF document, right? They don't know how to save a PDF document from a Word file, and you're expecting them to navigate a semi-automatic, right? You know, it's not a recipe for, So that's probably the biggest one. But I know it's such a sort of. It just doesn't make sense to us over here in the UK how that can happen.
I was in London just back a couple months ago. It was awesome there. It was awesome. I mean, listen, every country, every city, state, they all have its issues. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I can definitely agree with you that teachers and obviously this gun crisis, these are the biggest issues here in America. And education is like in crisis. This is like the number one thing, especially we're coming out of the pandemic. Teachers are burnt out. They are super frustrated. Students have more of a bad behavior. They have a shorter attention span. They're not getting the attention they need from parents. So teachers are getting all of these consequences over here, and we'll see. I mean, I think
it's similar sort of issues over here as well. There's definitely issues post-pandemic and the parenting side of things, and it's sort of become part of our society that teachers and schools are just expected to pick up those pieces and just be the answer to everything. And the government like to then use that. So whenever there is an issue with something, it's like, oh, right, well, we're going to make sure that teachers sort it. And it's like, well, we already sort it, but we can't do it if you're not going to fund the schools properly. And again, there's similar sort of things with the funding side of things. And, you know, I know a lot of teachers will spend their own wages buying school supplies, but I think that's more of an issue over there as well, as isn't it? So,
is it an issue in UK?
It's becoming more of an issue. So we've basically got a government in place that don't really like to invest in public services. So it's not just the education side of things; it's also the healthcare. So the best thing about living in England compared to America, I think, is our NHS, our National Health Service. So there will always be a hospital you can go to or see a doctor, and it's free. You don't pay. There's no sort of, you can get private medical insurance, but the NHS is an institute that's been set up where our taxes pay for the hospitals, doctors, and it means that, you know, if we had the triplets, I know in America you'd be given quite the hospital bill off the back of that, because it wasn't just the birth, there was the period in the ICU and so on. Not a penny in England. That you just don't pay. It's just part of, you know, our society. However, the current government have underfunded that so much over the past few years that it's sort of at breaking point itself. So we've got like record waiting times in hospitals, and again, a similar sort of recruitment and retention issue we're seeing in schools is also affecting the sort of healthcare system as well. So, you know, we've got a couple of years before another election, but I'm hoping the next government that comes in can invest more in public services.
Mm.
I see. Okay, speaking back about the education and teachers burnout, in the US and the UK, the differences that been a huge controversy in the UK surrounding an insulting new pay offer for the ever-increasing workload and pressure for teachers. Many teachers in their unions have criticized the offer, saying it fails to address the fundamental issues facing the profession, including high level of stress, burnout, and workload. So what's your opinion? And could you please tell us about your advocacy for teachers' rights and better working conditions?
Yeah, so I do feel very passionate about this because I think teaching should be the best job in the world. And, in some schools it is. And, the ability you have to influence and impact children to go on and fulfill their potential, it just makes it. But again, it's sort of like been taken advantage of by those at the top to underfund education and just rely on good people's goodwill. And just that's just not sustainable anymore. So compared to other public sector jobs in England, teachers have had the biggest real terms pay cut since 2010. I think it's sort of 25%-ish. Don't know the exact number. And basically every public service has been pretty much sort of striking recently for better pay deals. And teachers obviously have been one of those. But the government just don't seem to care. They've come out with an offer because teachers have been striking. We've had sort of 4 strikes days across the UK, and they came out with like a 4% increase where inflation I think is double that. But what the thing for me that really frustrated me was they're saying they can have this increase in pay, but the government aren't then going to fund it. So what's going to happen now is for the teachers to get that pay increase, it has to come out of existing school budgets. And at the minute, schools are struggling to make ends meet because of inflation, because of energy costs being the biggest one. So we've seen an increase in energy costs that have just skyrocketed. And the government have made no attempt to sort of supporting schools with that, putting a cap on it. So schools are paying a similar energy price to most businesses, which is just astronomical. So schools are really struggling to make ends meet. So if we were to accept that pay offer as it is now, what teachers are basically accepting there is a little bit of extra pay to get worse conditions to make your job, because there's not the money there for support staff and for decent resources and things like that. So it was announced this morning that the unions have rejected the offer. So it's looking like there could be more strike days on the horizon.
But what could be the step? What could be the steps besides going on strikes, or either any other actions teachers can take?
Yeah, I mean, the pay is the main focus of this strike, but from speaking with a lot of teachers, it's more the workload and the impact that then has on your well-being. So I always talk about how in England at the minute, we seem to be the hardest working generation of teachers, yet the least trusted. And the pressure that comes from above through sort of inspections and, lesson observations and the amount of paperwork you're expected to do that has no sort of impact on teaching and learning, but is just constant scrutiny, and the impact that can have on teachers' well-being, because it's a case of never feeling trusted, never feeling that you're good enough. And again, it just all detracts from the teaching and learning in class, which means the children get a worse deal because teachers aren't using their time effectively to concentrate on the most important thing of teaching. But again, the government don't seem to be proactive in that. They're not really listening or speaking to teachers to, so we had more recently, there was, we have an inspection system called Ofsted. Don't know if you're familiar with them.
Yeah,
so
we are.
Basically, they're a governing body that inspects schools and give them a grade, and it'll be like outstanding, good, requires improvement, or inadequate, I think. And the pressure from those visits, because they'll phone you on the Monday, they'll come in on the Tuesday. And the way that's set up at the minute is it's all sort of ex-head teachers, or you might get some inspectors that still work in a school, but they don't have to answer to anyone. So they can literally walk into a school, judge it as inadequate, use 2 days to find evidence to support that, and then you've got staff's livelihoods destroyed, because these grades hold so much weight as far as house prices in the local area. So if you get a bad Ofsted, that's going to affect the amount of children that want to come to your school, which then affects the amount of money your school gets for budget. So the other week, there was a tragic news of a head teacher called Ruth Perry, who tragically took her own life. And her sister said it was directly because of this Ofsted inspection she'd had. So there's a lot of movement and discussion in Ruth's memory to ensure this doesn't happen again. And so a lot of teachers are speaking out about the Ofsted inspection system. Not to say that there shouldn't be a level of accountability, but in its current form, it is just not a force for good. But again, the government have just sort of dismissed it and said, no, we need them, but not looking at how it can be improved so it's more of a force for good to reduce and release that pressure on teachers at the chalk face.
Yeah, we actually heard about that, Ruth Perry. We did some research, and it's really sad. So, I mean, these inspectors, these Ofsted inspectors, they come in unannounced, right?
Pretty
I'm
much.
assuming
If they've got to phone you the day before.
They phone you the day before, and
they sort of have a discussion with the head teacher to identify what their focus is going to be.
Okay, I see. And then they do like a very comprehensive assessment, and whatever they can possibly find, they'll get you on that, basically.
Yeah, that's the sort of feeling at the minute. And it's not to say that all inspectors are like that, because I know that there's some that are going in with the right intentions and being more supportive, but because you've got some of these rogue inspectors where the power's gone to the head and you know they're not accountable to anyone, that creates that fear. You don't know the luck of the draw you're going to get, and the impact that then has on workload, where schools are desperately trying to cover every possible base in case you get an inspector who is just adamant trying to catch you out. It's just, again, having that knock-on effect to everything. So, like I say, recruitment's at its all-time lowest. You can't get people into the profession. When they're in the profession, they're leaving. So the current statistics, 3 in every 10 leave within the first 3 years teaching. And I think it's like half in 5 years, I think. So we're at a point where unless things drastically improve, the education system isn't going to be sustainable. And who loses out the most there? Again, it's the children, you know?
100%. And I do want to make a quick comment about the 4 or 4.5% increase that was proposed. The most ridiculous thing about that is that proposal, that increase should come out of the school's budget. I mean, that is absurd. That's like, Lee, I'm going to pay you a little bit more, you're going to make up for that difference. I mean, how does that make sense? I mean, what? How does that make sense?
Especially when you've got a government who have wasted billions during the pandemic on all sorts, dodgy PPE contracts. And, there was a lot of stories where sort of MPs in England were giving deals worth millions and billions to friends of a friend on projects that just didn't have, there's all. So, it feels like there's not just teaching, but a lot of the public sectors have just had enough of it and aren't going to continue to allow it to happen, which is why we've got all these sort of strikes. And fingers crossed they'll come to the senses and see that if you want the best educational system, you've got to invest in schools and you've got to invest in teachers.
What about the out-of-pocket costs? How much teachers spend per year on average in UK? Just to buy for their class, like supplemental materials or something like this.
Again, I think that's becoming more and more common. I mean, it's frustrating that it has to happen, but you do get a lot of teachers who are spending money on, it might be resource subscriptions or whatever it might be. you know, and I'm seeing that with the courses that I run. So, you know, in the past couple of years, schools just haven't really had the money to send their teachers on courses and training sessions. So yeah, I mean, I don't think it's as frequent or as common as it is in America, but it is again increasing. I think there's more teachers doing sort of those things.
I think we've never met a teacher that has not spent money out of their own pocket, and it's like substantial. In fact, I think the national average is right now $800 per teacher out of pocket costs. So they're already getting paid, you know, very little money, and they have to come out and spend money on supplies and materials because the schools don't have the budget for it. They're just, you know, teachers are not equipped. And that's it. You know, you're just left in the dark. And if you're a teacher and you want to do something in your class, go buy it yourself.
$800. And whenever we speak with the teachers, we say $800 national average. They're laughing at us. They're paying minimum $800. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Again, I go back to that first point. It could be worse.
Yeah. I know you are a huge proponent of technology in the classroom.
Yeah.
Could you please share the differences, noticeable differences in the way students approach learning now compared to when you began teaching?
I'd love to say that across the board it's improved massively, but it was so slow at adapting to change. So, you know, as far as technology is concerned, schools have definitely had access to more technology since I started teaching. But whether they are utilising it effectively across the board, I'm not convinced. We're very again, it's that sort of level of accountability. So in England, schools are obsessed with making sure everything is in a book, in an exercise book, something physical that can be shown to an inspector or whoever it might be. And I've been campaigning for years about how through tools like an iPad, for example, children can evidence learning without it necessarily having to be printed, without it necessarily time being spent on photocopying and trimming and sticking it in a book. And, you know, we're slowly but surely getting there, but there are still so many schools who are like, okay, well, yeah, we can do something on an iPad, but if it goes on an iPad, we need to then print a QR code and stick it in a book. And I'm like, yeah, but what do you need to be able to scan a QR code? And they're like, an iPad. I was like, yeah, so you've got to have an iPad there. Just have it on the iPad, you know. And again, I think that sort of fear-driven system that we've touched upon almost forces a lot of schools to lose any type of common sense with a lot of things. Because I look at this modern day technology now and I just think, look, the accessibility tool more than anything else. These, you know, the iPad has a dictation tool. You've got Siri. You've got so many useful text reader tools that can remove barriers to allow children to, you know, access the rest of the these for me are absolutely necessary day to day in the classroom. And it's something that I've become very passionate about because two of my two boys, so the triplets, 2 boys and a girl, my 2 boys are both dyslexic and really struggle with their reading and writing. And I've seen firsthand how that can have such a negative impact on a child's confidence and willingness with their learning. And for me, that shouldn't be a barrier to learning in 2023, dyslexia, because there's that technology now that can remove those barriers. And on a lot of the training that I do, it's looking at ways in which the technology can be used to remove barriers. But also, a big focus of my training is sort of like, look, you've got these kids. If you ask any kid, and I'm sure it's the same in America, what they want to be when they're older, they all now say they want to be YouTuber. Yeah, YouTuber.
Yeah.
So I'm like, right, okay. So if you want to be a YouTuber, you've got to be really good at writing, because any YouTuber, the first thing that they will do is they'll sit down, they'll write a script, they'll plan out what they're then going to sort of perform. And that's what I do. If I get an idea for a video on my socials, I'll write it down first before I then record it. So for me, that's a way in which I've been able to improve the quality of writing with my pupils, because it's not a case of getting children to write because I'm going to mark it and assess it. it's getting children to write, because once that writing's done and done well, we can utilize the technology and we can go from writing a set of instructions to making a YouTube tutorial about such a thing. Instead of, if we're going to write a speech about climate change, the children can turn that into a green screen campaign video that we can then share on our school social media channels. And the impact that's had on the quality writing children produce, because the technology is making that learning purposeful beyond them writing, so that I can just mark it and assess it and tell them that they're doing all right at writing. So if it's utilized creatively and effectively, the technology can transform teaching and learning, and in my opinion, give them a skill set that's going to be more relevant to the world that they're sort of growing up into.
Yes, the key word is to utilize it effectively.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Don't get me wrong, it can be used dreadfully, and we see it a lot of the time. But I always talk about these two ways in which you can use a mobile, an iPad, a device. Is you can use it as a consumer, which is where you're just consuming all the content, you're watching videos, you're listening, blah, blah, and that has a place. But the best way in which we can encourage art is to create through it. So don't just watch a video, record your own. Don't just play video games, code your own. It's making sure you've got that right balance with it. Because, of course, the consumer side is great as well. There's lots of games, there's lots of apps, there's lots of tools we can use where the children can, learn and sort of acquire all that knowledge. But we've then also got to make sure they're using that knowledge effectively by creating with the technology as well.
I agree with that 100%. I do want to congratulate you. Today is a special day. Now, did you plan your launch of Teachmate AI in coordination with your kid's birthday?
I might have done, so I remember it. Now, it's we've been and ahhing as to when to do it, and it's no by no means it's final, and I suppose it'll never be final, because the improvements in AI will just continue to get better and better and better anyway. But we're at a point where we felt it was ready for teachers to give it a go and use it. And we're really excited about it because, I'm very passionate about helping teachers get their time back. And what we've been able to do with this site is sort of harness the AI that's doing the rounds through sort of ChatGPT and the like. And I know a lot of teachers are already using that and using it to great effect. What we've been able to do is just sort of fine tune it a little bit. And with the API from GPT, you can actually feed in more specific data. So what we're able to do is just give it a cleaner sort of approach, making it easier for teachers if they're not able to, necessarily get the best out of ChatGPT, the likes. We've been able to create a model where they will get the best output specific to the curriculum we're teaching in England. So, I mean, at the minute, it's more specific. The data we're feeding it is more specific to the English curriculum. But right. Obviously, it's at its infancy. So as it grows, we're going to be able to improve it massively. And there's going to be so many more improvements along the way as far as, the image recognition from AI. Mm-hmm. So again, that's just been announced. So where I hopefully see it is that assessment, for example, in England, the children, if you're looking at writing assessment, teachers will sit there and they'll discuss and they'll deliberate. We should hopefully soon be able to get to a point where teachers can feed examples of their children's writing, and then the AI will be able to look at it, analyze it, and within seconds say, yeah, that is expected standard for a year 5 pupil, is exceeding expected standard, and then identify why. And that should hopefully, again, save teachers loads of time. But that's the pipeline. That's where we want to sort of get it to.
I hope kids will still be able to write after AI came out.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of discussion about how tools like GPTs will affect students and their learning. As a primary school teacher, I'm not so sure children necessarily need to be using it in class. I've only focused on how teachers can use it to help them with certain admin tasks. And, the feedback we've had from sort of early testers with the website is that they've been able to save on average around about 10 hours a week with some of the tools, which is, really, really useful.
That's that's significant. That is
Yeah,
incredibly significant. If you
yeah,
save, if on average 10 hours a week, I mean, yeah, listen, we are at a very special time. I think, I mean, we're facing inflation. We're facing an education crisis over here. We're facing a gun crisis. There's a lot of things going on, but I but now we actually have. I mean, what OpenAI has been able to do is truly revolutionary, and the
yeah,
technology is only going to get significantly better. We're already
yeah.
on GPT-4, which is
Mm,
miles better than GPT 3.5 or GPT 3, uh, and it's a race, right? It's a race from all these big
mm,
companies, and there's a lot of companies out there coming up with clever solutions that create tools that's modified to help specific industries, just like you've done. But I'd love to learn a little bit more. So for example, what can teachers do? Like, what are some of the specific features that teachers can do on TeachMate AI today?
Oh, well, I think we've got sort of 70 plus tools already mapped out, and I think a good sort of 25 are available now. So it can be anything. It can be writing a letter to parents. So you can
Mm,
just very quickly put in an input of what you want to include in formal, informal, and it'll write the letter for you. One of my favorites is the descriptive language generator. So you can input a setting, a character, and then it will just generate a page full of descriptive language, adjectives, sentences, just that children can access to then use and
mm,
sort of magpie with their writing. We've got obviously over in England, our curriculum is very much this knowledge rich, and so knowledge organizer generators. So it'll give you timelines, interesting facts, endpoints to a particular
mm.
topic. If you are looking at a particular text type, the teacher can generate a sort of model text. So if we're going to write a persuasive advert, but I want it to include, certain aspects of what we call SPAG in England, which is your spelling, punctuation, and grammar, it will create that in a matter of seconds for you to then
Mm.
share with your class and deconstruct and sort of highlight what's good about what's effective in that piece of writing. So yeah, and obviously we've added in the other time consuming tasks like report writing, comments for
Okay.
reports, and that sort of thing. So there's a whole range of different tools and a lot of stuff again to support teachers with the whole Ofsted inspection
Mm.
process. A lot of paperwork goes into that, so hopefully we can streamline it and give teachers the time back.
So
Awesome. No,
basically,
that's
teachers who are not so tech savvy is going to be making life easier for them.
Yeah, and just like I say, saving them time, because again, with the AI, as much as we're inputting the data, nothing is ever going to. All AI does is make its best guess, its best prediction. Um, but obviously, the more specific you are with your input, and again, with what we've been able to do with the AI API, where we can feed it more specific education data, we're hoping teachers will get a better output than the sort of tools already available through the likes of ChatGPT.
I have a quick question, and this is outside of the scope of teachers, but in general, uh, what are people afraid of losing their jobs in different industries? Within the next year or two, with GPT coming out, and they see all these, they see all these crazy things coming out. Are they concerned? I mean, what's the general feeling over there?
I think it's definitely. I think depending on the industry, really. So I think obviously
Mm,
more tech-savvy industries are onto it already, and they're seeing it. And I've not come across anything that's sort of been as disruptive as this new AI stuff in a very long time.
yeah.
And obviously, the likes of there's a lot of tech companies who are laying a lot of jobs off. I've noticed that recently. So your
Mm,
Amazons, your Googles, Facebooks. So I think it will definitely disrupt and may well lead to. But like I say, what the AI doesn't have as yet is the human element to it. And you're seeing this with the sort of social media when I've been teaching a lot around AI with teachers about the social media algorithms and how the algorithms use AI to sort of predict what we want to engage with. But what the AI cannot do yet is decipher the misinformation, disinformation, and that side of things. So you've got to sort of embrace it, be aware of it. And when it comes to social media, be in control of your news feed rather than letting the news feed control you, sort of thing.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, listen, America has its problems. I still love America. I think America is great, although people talk a lot of things about it. But I will tell you one thing: America is great in its view of capitalism, and so all the companies here are already on a venture to think. I'm half joking, maybe I'm half serious, but how do we use this to our full advantage? How do we reduce our employee headcount? Who cares about the human element? If we can automate it, we will do it. You know, we care about our stock prices. We care. I mean, we care about our bottom line. And again, it's 50%.
And there's got to come a
50%
point where
half
we
joke.
decide how far we allow it to do that, because it's like over here we've had the train strikes, which have been going on for quite a few months. And in the media, a lot of the reports are sort of, why would train drivers be striking over pay when they get paid quite well already? And for me, they're not striking over pay. They know that it's within touching distance for these companies to have driverless trains, and they're campaigning for sort of job security. Right. And so, you know, you already see it a lot. If you go to a supermarket here, you don't have anyone on the till. Everything's automated. You know, you just go and scan it yourself, pay it yourself, and you're off. So it will come to a point where, as a society, we need to decide how far we actually allow this AI to replace. And I don't think it can ever replace that genuine human interaction. You know,
I agree with you. But I will say, I think we are going to see a lot of laws and regulations come out. I know there have been laws already passed on your end, but America is lagging behind. We don't really have any comprehensive data protection policies in place that include AI and generative AI. But we're getting there. This is like we are now. It's top of mind over here for regulators here. Now, Lee, I do want to ask you some quick questions. I want to throw your own questions back at you from some of the Instagram posts that you have made. Okay, so are you ready?
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, sounds good. What are your biggest teaching icks?
My biggest teaching ick has to be if you're sort of struggling with the behaviour of a class, and you might go to a colleague for a bit of advice, and they turn around and utter that line, which because again, it happened to me the other week, and I was like, this is not helpful, where they just say, oh, well, they behave for me. It's like, right, thanks for that. Anyway, what can so that's up there as one of my biggest teaching icks, that sort of, oh, well, they do it, they behave for me. Well, it doesn't help me, does it?
Right.
So that would be my top one, I think.
That's funny. Okay. What's the most random thing you've had to confiscate from a student?
Oh, where do we begin? I mean, how is this? Is it sort of PG, this podcast, or?
This just goes out to like teachers, so it's it can be anything you want.
Yeah, because I mean, what I would say is, for any parents out there, please put a lock on your sort of adult toy drawer, because the amount of so we've had a child on the playground waving a bright pink Harry Potter wand.
Wow.
Sort of screaming Expelliarmus, and it's like, listen, that's not what you think it is, my friend. That always makes for an interesting conversation at the end of the day. And obviously there was one where we assumed it was the parents, the mums, and it wasn't. It was grandma's. So the mum was distraught. That's not mine. That's not. And it turned out the child had stayed the night at grandma's, seen it, brought it in, and yeah.
All right, Lee, we also know that you are a huge football fan, so we wanted to know who you think is the greatest of all time, Messi or Ronaldo, and why?
Oh, I love the fact you've called it football as well and not soccer. I like that.
Well, I had to.
Yeah, see, I'd have always gone Ronaldo because I'm a Manchester United fan, and when he was there in his first stint at the club, he was just, I watched him so many. He was just unbelievable. However, the way he sort of left the club was so. It's such a difficult question because they're both unbelievable,
Right.
and I just feel privileged, I suppose, that I've been able to grow up watching them both, because I think we're going to struggle to find two players of that quality playing at the same time, having that sort of rivalry. But yeah, I think going off, if you're going to base it on the whole career, I'd probably go Messi. And obviously the achievements he's had, and obviously winning the World Cup, I think maybe just gets him across the line there.
Fair enough. I think Vlad has one more question for you.
Yeah, one last question. Who has been the strongest or most inspiring person in your life, and what lessons have you learned from them?
Oh, I've had quite a few, to be fair. Like my wife's incredible. She is the most understanding person, because I know if I was married to 1,000 other people, they would not put up with the time I have to dedicate and I put in, and she understands it. It's all for the right purpose. So she's definitely, I think, teaching wise, I had a teacher at school called Mr. Crawford, who was just such an unbelievable inspiration for me, and had a profound impact, and was probably the reason why I went into teaching. And I talk about it in the book because he was just a completely different character to any teacher I'd had before. And he was quirky, he was out there, and he just made such a unique connection with every single child in the class. And I never came across anyone who didn't love having him as a teacher. Now, unfortunately, he passed away when we were at school. So I had him from sort of year 7 to 11, so like from 11 to 16. And then he passed away when I must have been about 17. So I was still at the school at sort of sixth form. Now, about a month before he passed, we had gone on this sort of religious residential, because I went to sort of a Catholic school. And I say it was a religious residential. We were all 17, so we just took a load of booze and used it to drink underage, so to speak. And one of the exercises we did was we got to write a letter to someone who was influential to us, who had an impact, and I wrote my letter to him. And then once he passed, we were invited to the funeral. Students could go to his funeral, and I've never been to a funeral that was as busy as that, because literally everyone at the school, everyone who ever went to the school, it was packed beyond belief. And as part of the service, one of the teachers got up and sort of said, "Look, we want to, pay your respect as a teacher, and these letters that were written at this residential were shared with the teacher the day before he passed away." And then they read out the letter during the funeral, and I was just like, "Oh my!" I was gone. I've never cried as much as I did, just sort of knowing that he'd known the impact he'd had before he passed. So yeah, he was very inspiring.
Wow, thank you so much for sharing that powerful story. And ending with that story, we've talked a lot about, teachers being burnt out, teachers are in a crisis, teachers are getting a low pay cut, teachers this, teachers that, a lot of negative things coming out. But such a beautiful ending over here, because a teacher changed my life also. And I think we really have to understand, I think teachers need to understand, obviously we need to get things better, but they have such a prominent job, a prominent role that they play in children's lives. And so your teacher has changed your life. You are now teaching, you are now changing other students' lives. And it's, as a teacher, even if you impact one student so greatly as the story you just shared, you've done your job. That's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's all, and I think it's fair to say that, and I really do believe that in a teacher's lifetime, you at minimum change one child for the rest of their life in a monumental way that you may never know about. That child may go on to do amazing things that you won't know, but they've done it, and they attribute a lot of their success to that teacher.
Absolutely,
So thank you for everything that you do. Thank you so much, Lee, for joining us. I want to thank you for sharing your valuable insights and experiences with us. For our listeners who want to learn more about Mr. P, be sure to visit his website at mrpict.com. Check out his podcast on all platforms. Give his books a read, or catch him live during his tour on the UK this fall. And follow him on all social media at ICT_MRP. Thank you so much, Lee. It was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thank you so much. Take care.